Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show, This Week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. The Obama administration is being slammed by U.S. lawmakers of both parties today for allowing the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution demanding an immediate end to Israel's presence in Judea, Samaria, and even parts of Jerusalem. The White House ignored calls from President-elect Donald Trump, as well as Israel and several American senators, to veto the measure. New Zealand, Malaysia, Venezuela, and Senegal advanced the bill for a vote by the 15-member council. This happened just one day after Egypt withdrew the text it drafted with the Palestinians, primarily because of a personal request from Trump. The U.S. abstention allowed the anti-Israel bill to pass in what's being seen as a parting shot by President Barack Obama, who's long held an acrimonious relationship with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The outgoing U.S. leader also made the settlements a major target of his peace efforts that were ultimately proven futile. After the vote, the U.S. ambassador to the UN did her best to justify the radical shift in policy.
It is because this forum too often continues to be biased against Israel, because there are important issues that are not sufficiently addressed in this resolution, and because the United States does not agree with every word in this text, that the United States did not vote in favor of the resolution. But it is because this resolution reflects the facts on the ground and is consistent with U.S. policy across Republican and Democratic administrations throughout the history of the State of Israel that the United States did not veto it.
The passage of the resolution changes nothing on the ground between Israel and the Palestinians and is likely to be ignored by both the Trump and Netanyahu administrations. But the U.S. decision to withdraw its diplomatic protection of Israel is still viewed as dangerous because it's likely to spur further Palestinian moves against Israel in international forums. Other senior Israeli officials believe it could even encourage the unleashing of further Palestinian terrorism against the Jewish people. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is wasting no time in fighting back against the UN member states, which supported the controversial resolution. At the beginning of this morning's weekly cabinet meeting, Netanyahu told his ministers he shares their anger and frustration over the vote, which he calls hostile and unbalanced. Just a few days ago, he told U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry that friends do not take friends to the Security Council, and that even though Washington and Jerusalem differ over the settlements, they've previously agreed the UN isn't the place to resolve this issue. The Israeli leader says now it will be even harder to negotiate with the Palestinians and that peace has only been driven further away. He also says it's rewarding to see how many Republican and Democratic friends are standing with Israel and that he's looking to them and the next U.S. administration. President-elect Donald Trump tweeted his own criticism of the vote and vows things will be different after he takes office on January 20th. Meanwhile, Netanyahu says the Jewish state has no choice other than to reassess its ties with the United Nations, and has ordered the ambassadors of the Security Council states to be summoned for a formal reprimand, even though it's Christmas Day. Immediately after the close of the Sabbath, Netanyahu assured the Jewish nation the shameful UN vote will be countered.
בנוסף, אני הנחיתי את משרד החוץ להשלים תוך חודש הערכה מחדש של כל ההתקשרויות שלנו עם האו"ם, כולל המימון הישראלי למוסדות האו"ם והנוכחות של נציגי האו"ם בארץ. כבר עכשיו הוריתי להפסיק מימון של כ-30 מיליון שקל ל5 מוסדות של האו"ם, 5 גופים שהם עוינים במיוחד נגד ישראל. כבר עכשיו לעצור את זה, והמשך יבוא.
The Israeli leader did not offer any further details, but so far all of Israel's significant aid programs to one of the bill's co-sponsors, Senegal, have been canceled. Netanyahu also shelved the planned visit of the Senegalese foreign minister, as well as this week's visit by Ukraine's prime minister for supporting the resolution. Left-wing groups, on the other hand, say the bill isn't as bad as it seems.
The Security Council's resounding resolution reaffirms the international consensus on the settlements and their consequences with regard to the human rights of Palestinians. Contrary to government spin, This resolution is not an anti-Israeli resolution. This is a resolution that is for the future of Israelis, for the future of Palestinians, rejecting the occupation and the settlements.
The Netanyahu government and its constituency disagree, citing the Jewish people's biblical connection to the land. It looks like the saga continues. The Palestinians helped to draft the UN resolution against Israeli settlement building, and their outspoken support of its approval is already prompting shifts in Israeli policy. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says the UN vote is a clear statement from the world that Israel's building on land over the 1967 borders, including Jerusalem, is an illegitimate enterprise. In response, Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is ordering that all civil and diplomatic contact with the PA be severed. This directive could affect Jerusalem's recent cabinet decision to increase the number of Palestinians permitted to cross into the Jewish state for work. It might also impact Israel's proposal to create an industrial zone in the southern West Bank for the Palestinians, or even the transfer of 5 armored jeeps from Jordan to PA security forces. Despite these potential changes, though, security coordination between the two sides will continue as before. The Israeli army has recently been able to gradually reduce its presence in many West Bank cities, since the Palestinian police are doing more and stopping up to 40% of attempted terrorist attacks. Tensions are higher than ever between the United States and Israel following a controversial speech by the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry on what needs to be done to address the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
But now I must express my deep disappointment with the speech today of John Kerry, a speech that was almost as unbalanced as the anti-Israel resolution passed at the UN last week. In a speech ostensibly about peace between Israelis and Palestinians, Secretary Kerry paid lip service to the unremitting campaign of terrorism that has been waged by the Palestinians against the Jewish state for nearly a century. What he did was to spend most of his speech blaming Israel for the lack of peace by passionately condemning a policy of enabling Jews to live in their historic homeland and in their eternal capital, Jerusalem.
Netanyahu says Israel does not need to be lectured about peace by foreign leaders, especially since the Jewish state has sought peace with the Palestinians from day one.
Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders. Israel's hand has been extended in peace to its neighbors from day one, from its very first day. We've prayed for peace. We've worked for it every day since then.
The Prime Minister then expressed his deep disappointment with U.S. President Barack Obama, which is why he says he's looking forward to a Trump presidency.
Secretary Kerry said that the United States cannot vote against its own policy. But that's exactly what it did at the UN. And that's why Israel opposed last week's Security Council resolution, because it effectively calls the Western Wall occupied Palestinian territory, because it encourages boycotts and sanctions against Israel. That's what it effectively does. And because it reflects a radical shift in U.S. policy towards the Palestinians on final status issues, those issues that we always agreed, the U.S. and Israel, have to be negotiated directly, face-to-face, without preconditions. That shift happened despite the Palestinians walking away from peace and from peace offers time and time again, despite their refusal to even negotiate peace for the past 8 years, and despite the Palestinian Authority inculcating a culture of hatred towards Israel in an entire generation of young Palestinians. Israel looks forward to working with President-elect Trump and with the American Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, to mitigate the damage that this resolution has done and ultimately to repeal it.
Netanyahu then concluded with a poignant call for the Palestinians to fully recognize Israel and to stop inciting violence against the Jewish people, so that a true peace can be achieved.
My vision is that Israelis and Palestinians both have a future of mutual recognition, of dignity, mutual respect, coexistence. But the Palestinian Authority tells them that they will never accept and should never accept the existence of a Jewish state. So I ask you, how can you make peace with someone who rejects your very existence?
Kerry's remarks and Netanyahu's reply mark the closing chapter of an increasingly bitter relationship between Washington and Jerusalem over the past 8 years, amid serious clashes ranging from Israeli building policies to the 2015 Iranian nuclear accord. The Palestinian president has responded to Kerry's speech on a positive note, saying that he still thinks peace with Israel is attainable as long as Israel halts settlement building before negotiations restart. His chief negotiator Saeb Erekat relayed that message in a speech last night.
President Mahmoud Abbas followed with great interest tonight Secretary of State John Kerry's speech and reiterated his full commitment to a just peace as a strategic option, and said the minute the Israeli government agrees to cease all settlement activities, including in East Jerusalem, and agrees to implement, on the basis of reciprocity, agreements signed, that the Palestinian leadership stands ready to resume permanent status negotiations on the basis of international law, relevant international legality resolutions, including the recent Security Council Resolution 2334/2016.
The Israeli Prime Minister has already been quick to speak out against Kerry's speech, claiming the U.S. Secretary of State is being biased against the Jewish state. For 70 minutes, Kerry warned that the future of a two-state solution to the Middle East conflict was at risk.
Despite our best efforts over the years, the two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy. The truth is that trends on the ground, violence, terrorism, incitement, settlement expansion, and the seemingly endless occupation, they are combining to destroy hopes for peace on both sides and increasingly cementing an irreversible one-state reality that most people do not actually want.
Kerry also condemned Palestinian violence, which he said included hundreds of terrorist attacks in the past year. But he also vigorously defended Washington's abstention during the December 23rd vote on the UN's anti-settlement resolution.
And if we had vetoed this resolution just the other day, the United States would have been giving license to further unfettered settlement construction that we fundamentally oppose. So we reject the criticism that this vote abandons Israel. On the contrary, it is not this resolution that is isolating Israel. It is the permanent policy of settlement construction that risks making peace impossible.
Right before John Kerry gave his controversial speech, there was a lot of confusion as to whether the Jerusalem Planning Commission was going to approve even more Jewish projects in East Jerusalem or delay a vote on the issue. Well, the committee did go ahead and greenlight one building, but held off on the construction for hundreds of others. The Jerusalem Municipal Committee pulled back from approving 492 new homes, after they say Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked for a delay so as not to provide even more fuel to the Secretary of State's anti-building argument. But the committee reportedly forged ahead nonetheless by granting permission for one 4-story building that's now being condemned by local groups opposed to such projects.
So today we've been watching a masterful shell game being played. This morning, hundreds of building permit approvals were removed from the agenda of the local committee. And this afternoon, the local committee approved a permit for a new building in Bat Nal Hawa Silwan. The impact is corrosive both to the Palestinian community, the people living in it, the fabric of the community, all of the Palestinian neighborhoods around the historic basin, and also imperils a two-state solution by consolidating Israeli control of the Old City and historic basin in lieu of and in advance of any kind of negotiations that might take place in the future.
Many Israeli leaders remain insistent that Israel has the right to build on its own sovereign nation and are furious the Obama administration failed to block the passage of the latest anti-settlement resolution from the UN Security Council. Here's part of the message Education Minister Naftali Bennett had for Kerry just ahead of the American diplomat's policy speech.
Secretary Kerry, a few days ago, the United Nations Security Council voted for a shameful resolution, a resolution that essentially says that Jerusalem is occupied territory. Well, Jerusalem was the Jewish capital 3,000 years ago. It's in the Bible. Just open it up. No UN resolution and no speech can change the fact that Jerusalem has always been and will always be the Jewish eternal capital.
As images from the Syrian civil war are aired on news bulletins, many Israelis feel they just can't sit by silently and not do something to help. Most are simply shocked by what they're seeing.
Things like that on TV, you basically see the fighting. When you see it firsthand, it kind of shocks you, is to see that it's actually families that are involved. It's little kids, it's children.
Many Israelis are using social media to collect money and supplies for the Syrian people. One Israeli mother posted a message on Facebook in efforts to collect essential clothing needed by Syrian children.
אתה מרגיש שאנשים רק מתים לעשות משהו. עכשיו שוב, מה זה בגדים? זה קשקוש, זה לא יעצור שם שום דבר. אבל זה איזושהי הרגשה, כי אתה רואה את המראות ואתה נחנק, אתה לא יודע מה לעשות עם עצמך. הילד שלך ישן מעולה במיטה, הכל טוב, ושם הם מתחת להריסות. הם הולכים מפוחדים, מבועטים. וזה פה, הם שכנים, וזה בכלל לא קשור סורים, לא סורים, זה לא מעניין, זה בני אדם, זה חפים מפשע. מה שאפשר לעשות, עושים, ובאמת, עם ישראל יצא מגדרו.
The donations are being transferred to an Israeli hospital which treats wounded Syrian refugees, only after all their Hebrew labels have been removed. The wounded victims have to be brought in discreetly because Syria remains in a formal state of war with Israel. Many arrive on buses provided by an Israeli NGO called Amalia, whose founder says Jewish history during the Holocaust should drive every Israeli to help when atrocities are taking place across the border.
And I actually felt us as Jews, us of Israeli, we gotta wake up, because this is what the Syrian people are actually going through, that Holocaust. They did. The Israeli, I can tell you for sure, in the last week woke up.
The chairman of Israel's Holocaust Memorial is also calling on the international community to do more to end the carnage in Syria.
I think that the time has come, and the world leaders must take the right steps to stop those massacres, atrocities, and the murder, and to assist and give a hand to those victims who are looking for safe haven and humanity help.
The head of another Israeli NGO organized a protest in front of the Russian embassy in Tel Aviv, partially due to the reminder from his parents who survived the Holocaust that the world kept silent during the murder of 6 million Jews.
The only thing we can do is just try to press, to yell, to help our prime minister and the government, to help the Syrian people. And apparently they move in the right directions. They did it before, and hopefully they'll do it in the future, more.
The Israeli Prime Minister has just announced that even more ways are now being developed to expand the Jewish state's medical assistance for Syrian women, children, and non-combatant men. It's Christmas Day, and there's no place more meaningful for Christians to be than in the Holy Land. Aaron, I know this might sound like a sarcastic question, but what is so newsworthy about Christians gathering in the birthplace of Jesus on Christmas?
Well, due to the wave of terror, tourism in Palestinian-controlled areas has taken a really hard hit. So it's nice to see that, things are taking a turn for the better. Pilgrims from around the world packed the site believed to be Jesus' place of birth in Bethlehem's Manger Square for Christmas Eve celebrations.
It's a very special atmosphere, and it's very special to come to the very place where all started with the Catholic and religion. So I feel very privileged to be able to be here with my family, and it's very exciting to be here.
Bethlehem is the place where Jesus is born, so it's a special day for us to come. It's the first day that we are here on the 24th of December, so we celebrate it together with everybody. Is happy here, singing on the streets. There is life. It's great to be here.
It's our first time in here, so it's really special for us to come here in the Christmas Eve, and we really appreciate being here.
Tourism is a major source of revenue for the Palestinian economy and provides livelihoods for about 5,000 families in the biblical city. About 2.3 million people visited the territories this year, which is slightly more than last year, given the relative drop in Palestinian violence. One of the season's highlights is the special Christmas midnight mass at the Church of the Nativity, led by the acting Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem.
First of all, we want to welcome the President of the State of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen. We are very happy and grateful for his presence. According to the tradition, your presence, as I said many times, is a comfort and a strength for our Christian community.
The 4th century church is currently undergoing its first comprehensive renovation since it was completed 1,700 years ago. Many of the pilgrims' Holy Land itineraries also include visits to nearby Jerusalem, as well as Jesus' boyhood town of Nazareth in the Galilee, which is now the largest Arab city in Israel.
Have you ever seen someone get emotional over a pastry? Well, that happens to be exactly what I witnessed this week when I hit the bakeries of Tel Aviv to get a taste of what's frying this Hanukkah. Check it out. Donuts, donuts, donuts. When you think about donuts, you probably don't think about Israel. But as surprising as it may sound, the Holy Land is actually one of the epicenters of this fried delicacy, especially during Hanukkah season. Donuts up! Yes, I know what you're thinking. What do donuts have to do with Hanukkah? Well, it turns out a lot. The rationale behind eating sufganiyot on the Jewish Festival of Lights is basically the same for latkes. Oily foods help recall the miracle of the oil during the 2nd century BCE, when a small band of faithful Jews known as the Maccabees reclaimed the Holy Temple and rededicated it to the service of God. When they sought to light the temple's menorah, they could only find a single drop of olive oil that had survived their war against the Syrian Greeks. Yet miraculously, that little drop ended up lasting for 8 days until new oil could be prepared. Until today, Jews around the world continue to celebrate that very miracle by stuffing themselves silly with the oiliest of foods. And believe me, it marks the perfect time of year to visit the Holy Land.
I've been here for about 3 days. I passed these donuts on my first day and I said, oh my God, there is just nothing like this in Toronto.
In fact, every year, over 18 million of the Jewish donuts are consumed in Israel during the Hanukkah week. That averages out to about 3 donuts per citizen. Even the Israeli Defense Forces go crazy for the sugary treats, purchasing more than 50,000 sufganiyot to boost the morale of the soldiers. And there are a lot of flavors to choose from. Between Roladin and Shemo, 2 of the most popular bakeries in Israel, this year alone there are over 29 flavors to choose from. 29! This is a cream-filled chocolate donut. We have the strawberry jam donut. This is the most popular and common donut in Israel. Typically, you can find this basically everywhere. But not all of the flavors are easy to identify. This delight over here would be the Roladin cream mascarpone with some berry flavors. I'm not sure what all the ingredients are in here. The Hebrew is a little bit difficult for me, but it looks good. That's the most important thing. Now, if you're worried about the heavy calorie intake, here's our advice. Just don't think about it. The Israeli health minister has actually made it his mission this year to convince Israelis to eat fewer sufganiyot as part of a larger crackdown on unhealthy food. But not everyone is convinced that he's going down the right path.
Hanukkah's once a year, so eat as much as you want.
This Hanukkah, I think I'll take her advice. All right, I don't think anybody's watching right now, so now's my chance. Here's to a happy and healthy Hanukkah.